honors students. Today's lesson is going to be on distributing with fractions. I think in the original schedule for the week I had called it algebraic application of fractions, but I think we're just going to do distributing now and save some of the algebraic part for in our regular unit. So we can kind of get by with this a little more quickly, okay? So the assignment for today, distributing with fractions, that's for Tuesday, August the 11th is our assignment for today. There is no class today. What you're going to do today for your attendance and participation is to turn in a copy of your notes from this video. Okay, so just like the first video, we're going to first update our table of contents and then get straight into some notes. This is just a really quick lesson. So once the lesson is done, you have an assignment that goes with it that is due by Friday. So you've already had one assignment this week that was just fraction review, and that was a Delta Math assignment, which hopefully you've begun and hopefully finished. That's not due until Friday. I will go in and check them probably later today or tomorrow. This first week has been really busy, but I might give you some feedback on that. Delta Math is pretty self-explanatory though. You can see what grade you have and you can just keep doing problems until you have 100 on each section. Okay, but this assignment that I'm going to give you today is going to be a handwritten assignment. You'll be able to open a PDF document that shows a sheet with the problems. If you have a printer, you're welcome to print it, but normally those kinds of assignments, it's fine to just do it on notebook paper. The one thing you need to do really strongly is to put the title at the top of your paper so that later on when you're thinking, I need to correct this assignment, if none of your assignments have titles at the top, it's going to be hard to figure out which one you're looking for. So that's just one tip from me to you. Always put your title at the top of your paper for your homework so that you can find it and determine which one is which later on, okay? Okay, so first things first, we're going to do our table of contents. Okay, I've added a second page to our unit 0, and I did, darn it, I'm going to change this right now. I changed the title to distributing with fractions. Dadgummit. Sorry about that. So I'm going to make this page 2, distributing with fractions. So there we go. Pause the video if you need to update your table of contents, and I'm going to keep on rolling. So there was our page from yesterday. So I'm going to get over to a blank page here to do my notes with you. So this is page 2. If I use more than one page, I'm still going to label it as 2 because we're using the numbers as basically a section, right? Like section 2 is distributing with fractions. If it takes me 1 page or 5 pages, just label all the pages 2, and that way we'll hang together and you'll know that they all go together, right? Okay, distributing with fractions, this is going to be super simple. We're going to talk about 3 different ways that this can happen, and I'm going to split them out because there's problems like each of the different ways on your homework. So we're going to be distributing with fractions when you have a fraction distributing into the parentheses, we're going to be distributing when you have a fraction, a whole number distributing into parentheses with a fraction. And that might have one or both of the numbers in the parentheses as a fraction, or fraction into parentheses with fractions. Well, I'm just trying to be clear what the 3 different ways are. We are going to be doing a lot of work with linear functions and other kinds of functions, but linear are the primary ones that are going to have fractions, because in a linear function, the fraction, the slope many times is a fraction. And so we have fractions embedded within it naturally, because slope is often a fraction, okay? So we're going to just practice some of this. We're going to do a couple examples of each kind, which should be really quick. So hopefully this video will be over and done with really soon. The first thing that I want to try to get us all on the same page with is that since we're doing algebra, we want to do our work in an algebraic fashion, right? And when we do our work in algebra, generally, and I'm going to write this over to the left side here just so I have it, work in algebra, we're just going to have algebra work, and then we're going to go down a line and do the next step of our algebra work, and down a line to do the next step of our algebra work. We don't generally do our work from left to right in algebra. We're always going drop down a line, drop down a line, drop down a line each time we do something new in our work, okay? So that way that makes everybody kind of on kind of a set way of doing things, right? So our first example here is we're going to do really easy distribution of 1/2 times the quantity x plus 3. So when we have parentheses, we usually say the quantity of, and that's what tells you that that is in parentheses when you're writing. So this is read out loud as 1/2 times the quantity x plus 3. Okay, so now we're going to distribute our half into the parentheses and so this one is a super simple fraction, right? And the first thing to say is that when you have a fraction distributed into the parentheses and there is no number or just a 1 in front of your x, then all you do is put the fraction and the variable together, and that's something that sometimes strangely confuses people more than having numbers to multiply. So that's one thing to just think about and why we did this example to begin with. Then we're multiplying 1/2 times positive 3, and we got to make sure that we think of this second number as the sign and the number. So we have positive 1/2 times positive 3. Okay, and when we are multiplying a whole number times a fraction, we multiply the whole number times the top, and then the denominator stays the same. Okay, the plus here comes from positive times positive is positive. So we don't just bring this symbol down, we consider what this symbol will be based on what kind of signs are being multiplied, right? So that's another consideration when you're distributing that we all kind of need to make sure everybody is on the same page with, okay? So this is a fraction into your parentheses. Let's do another one. 3/4 times 2x plus 5. Certainly this is a place when we're in the video where stop the video and go ahead and do it, and if you get it right and you're like, okay, I got this, I know exactly what we're doing, right? I'm going to write out maybe more steps than sometimes I would, because this is my notes, right? And I'm trying to be clear. When I'm thinking about distributing, generally, if I'm going to write it out a little more expanded than I did on this first problem to make sure I understand exactly what I'm doing, I'm going to start by writing the 2 from this 2x, right? Because I want to do this multiplication, but it helps us with the sign if we start with what's in parentheses and say 2, and then I'm going to multiply that times 3/4, right? That's this distribution of the multiplying these two numbers, and then there's the x, just keep it at the end. Okay, then I'm saying plus 5, because right now I'm not actually multiplying, I'm just expanding it out and showing the multiplication between these. So this one is 5 times 3/4. So that's just an expansion, which I'm writing it in a different color because you don't necessarily have to write that, but that's what's happening, right? The whole number times the numerator, 2 times 3, gives us 6/4 because the denominator stays the same and x is connected there. This one is positive 5 times positive 3/4, so that's still going to be a plus. 5 times 3 is 15 for the numerator, and the denominator stays the same. This example is here to also show you, and that's the same in the first one. We need to talk about both of these. Neither one of these can be simplified any further because you cannot combine 1/2 x plus 3/2. Do you know why? You cannot combine 6/4 x plus 15/4. Okay, they do have common denominators, but in math, when we have an unknown quantity, here, an x with this term, that means this one can't necessarily go with the one that doesn't have the unknown, right? They are unlike terms. So when you learned about combining like terms, you learned that terms that have an x can only go with other terms that have an x. Terms that are numbers with no variable can only go with other numbers with no variable, right? So this is as simplified as I can make that. There's no way I can figure out what x is because it's not equal to anything, and there's no way I can combine those because they are not alike. So that is as far as I can go. Same thing here. I've distributed, right? And I've looked at it and said they can't go together because this one has an x and this one does not have an x. So this is as simplified as I can make it. Okay? So all we're doing now is distributing. We're not solving equations, and that's because you don't know what it's equal to. You have to know what it's equal to in order to be able to solve it, right? We're going to do one more like this because we're going to put some signs in there. Negative 3/6 times negative 4x plus 4. And really, we're just doing a little bit more example-wise just to get everybody back remembering your integer rules and things like that, because sometimes that's really one place that causes a lot of problems in Math 1. People getting things wrong because they're just not considering the sign. Okay, so if I expand it out, which you do not have to do, I'm going to start by putting negative 4 times negative 3/6 x. Then I'm going to put this plus 4 first, times negative 3/6. Okay, now I'm just going to multiply, and if it's in your head, that's perfectly fine. Some people have trouble with the sign of this second number and putting the plus or minus in the answer, and expanding it this way can help you avoid that mistake. Even if you only do it at the beginning here, it'll help you solidify figuring that sign, okay? Negative 4 is a whole number times the numerator negative 3. Negative times negative is positive, so that's 12. The denominator stays the same, and the x is connected. Positive 4 times negative 3. Positive times negative is always going to be negative. That means that there's a minus instead of a plus here. So the sign of the answer to this multiplication becomes the plus or minus in the answer. 4 times 3 is 12. Right? So I already had the negative here as the minus, so I just multiply 4 times 3 is 12, and 6 is the denominator. Okay? We do need to simplify on this one. We said that we would only simplify by division, right? And when we see that 6 will go evenly into 12, that really is division. We're actually dividing the top and the bottom by 6, but on the bottom becomes a 1, which turns it into a whole number, right? But you can also think of when it goes in evenly from bottom to top, turns it into a whole number, right? So 6 into 12 is 2, so that's 2x. The minus stays the same. We're not math in our simplification. And dividing by 6 on the top and bottom gives us 2 over 1, which is 2, right? Or 6 into 12 is 2 times. So now these cannot go together because the first term has an x and the second term does not have an x. So we're done simplifying. Okay, so those were all the ones that was distributing a fraction into the parentheses, right? So I didn't really give it a title here, but this one was a fraction into the parentheses. Sorry, you can't see that. I just put this little title here. This was our first iteration here, the fraction into parentheses. Now we're going to do whole number into parentheses with fractions, and we just got a couple more examples and we're going to be done. 4 times the quantity, negative 5/6 n plus 1. Okay, so now we have our same kind of situation. We're just going to start with if we're expanding it out, we're going to start with the fraction in parentheses times the number outside and then the n. Plus 1, we're going to keep with the what's in parentheses first, then times the distribute number. And that helps us get the sign right if we need that help. The whole number, so it doesn't matter if the whole number is in front or behind. When you have a whole number times a fraction, you always do the whole number times the top. Okay, 4 times negative 5 is going to be negative 20. The denominator stays 6, and there's my n. Positive 1 times positive 4 is positive 4, so this is plus 4. Can we simplify? So the only thing to do here is to check if you have fractions, if they'll simplify. 20 and 6 are both even numbers divisible by 2. What else will go into 6? 3. Will that go into 20? No. 6 will go into 6. Will that go into 20? No. So 2 is our divide number to simplify this. So that'll be the negative 10 and over 3n plus 4. Now we've simplified it. We cannot combine the terms because one has a variable and the other one does not. So this one was a whole number and a fraction in parentheses. The last example we're going to do is fraction outside and fraction inside the parentheses. So we got 9/5 times negative 3/4 x plus 1. Okay, now the problems on your homework might have a fraction here where this whole number is, so they might all be fractions. Okay, but this example just has an outside and an inside with the first term but not the second term. Okay, so if we expand this out like I've been doing, I'm going to put negative 3/4 first times 9/5 and then the x plus 1 times 9/5. So that's the expansion of what's happening that a lot of people do in their heads. And if you're doing it correctly, that's no problem at all. So fraction times fraction gives us numerator times the numerator to get the numerator. Negative 3 times, okay, let me back up again and say something else. When you have a negative fraction, generally you always operate with the negative connected to the numerator, and then the denominator is not negative. So in a fraction, a negative fraction has generally we think of it as having a negative numerator, right? Only one of the numbers in a negative fraction is actually negative, and that's something we'll clarify more as we go. But if you have a negative fraction, move the negative up with your numerator and keep the denominator positive when you operate, okay? Negative 3 times 9 is negative 27. On the top, the denominator is 4 times 5, which is 20, and then we have the x connected to it. Then we have the whole number times a fraction, so the whole number times the numerator is the numerator, so that's 1 times 9 is 9. Denominator stays the same. So now the only thing we need to do is to see if the fractions, either of these fractions will simplify, and what will go into 20? 2 will, but it won't go into 27. 4 will, but 4 won't go into 27. 5 will, but 5 won't go into 27. 10 will, but 10 won't go into 27. That's all the numbers, okay? So this one is not simplifiable. 5, the only number that goes into 5 is 5, and that won't go into 9, so it's completely done. We're completely done with this one, okay? So that is all the problem types that are going to be on your homework, and the main thing I'm looking for from you, especially in honors, is to see if you can get your signs and things right. I assume that everybody pretty much has these skills, and we're just reviewing here, but the main thing I want to know is, can you be precise? Can you make sure 100% that you're getting the right answer when you're multiplying with positives and negatives? Right, so that's why that middle step that I wrote in red here is kind of important, because even when you're a very good math person, the biggest thing that you need to eliminate is careless mistakes. And so sometimes writing out a little more can help you avoid careless mistakes, because sometimes you're jumping ahead, jumping around because you feel like you know exactly what you're doing, and so sometimes you don't think or take the time that's needed to make sure you're not making a careless mistake, if that makes sense, okay? So your assignment is on the Google Classroom, right where you clicked on this video. If you just click and open that PDF, you copy the problems onto your paper, complete them, use Cam Scanner to take your picture, and upload that by Friday at midnight. There's an assignment posted also. It posted today, but it's not due until Friday for you to upload this work, okay? You guys have a great evening, and let me know if you have questions.